Okay, so I'm going to be talking about step number 3 in a minute in this series of 6 steps to go from an angry to a happy and confident mom. But first, I just want to let you know, if this is your first time here, if you look at the links below, there is step number 1 and step number 2. So you might want to look at those first because this is a series. There's 6 steps that will help you go from an angry to a confident mom. And I share in step number 1 my story of how I was a very impatient, angry mom who yelled all the time, who just was not enjoying motherhood, to how I am now a happy and a confident mom most of the time. So you would want to check that out. That will be in step number 1, the video there. But let's move on to those of you that have done step number 1 and step number 2 to step number 3, which is here. If you haven't downloaded this already, this is on the blog post and free. But step number 3 is to create your realistic vision for yourself as a mom. Now, one of the most important words there was realistic. You want this to be realistic because we already went through our rule book, right? We have for ourselves as a mom. And you probably realized that a lot of those rules you had for yourself are unrealistic. So now we're going to look at your vision for yourself. And what a vision really is just how you want to see yourself in the future, how you envision yourself acting, how you kind of see in your mind's eye in a world where you were confident and happy and had more patience and enjoyed motherhood more. How would that look? Now, before you start creating that in your journal, I want to talk to you about this concept of life being part messy and life being part beautiful. So I think one of the biggest lies we tell ourselves, as moms especially, is that we should be happy all the time as a mom. We should feel nothing but love 100% of the time towards our kids. We should be blessed that we have kids, right? So all these things we tell ourselves that we should be feeling, when in reality, that's not how life goes, okay? I learned this concept and I love it. Learned it in coaching, that life is made up of the 50-50. So 50% of the time, you are going to feel the emotions that you look forward to feeling, right? Which would be love and happiness and maybe joy. And then 50% of the time, you're also going to feel, and I'm looking at my journal because I wrote this down, you're also going to feel frustrated and angry and disappointed. So when I was doing this reflecting on myself, I really worked hard to keep in mind that I can feel those things that I want to feel towards my kids, but it's also, I'm going to feel, because that's just how life is. I am going to feel angry sometimes. I'm going to feel frustrated. I'm going to feel disappointed. And that is the reality of life. As much as we would love to believe that nothing bad ever happens, or bad things shouldn't happen, or our kids should always listen to us, what we're learning through all this reflection, right, is that that's not the case. The only person we can control is ourselves. And in life, we've all been through things that were bad and things that we didn't want to happen. And those things don't stop happening, unfortunately. That's just the way that life is, right? So you are going to feel those emotions sometimes that are uncomfortable, that you don't want to feel those negative emotions, but you're also going to feel positive emotions. So if you can accept that that is just the human experience, all these emotions are part of life. If we did not have disappointment and grief and sadness, we would not know what joy and happiness feel like, right? So all those emotions make up our life. So when we take those into account, knowing that life is part messy, part anger, part frustration, part disappointment, and also part happy, part joy, part gratefulness, then use that to create your realistic vision of how you want to show up as a mom. So, for example, create a realistic vision of how you want to show up when you are feeling anger. How do you want to show up when you are disappointed with the choices maybe your child made? How do you want to show up when your child is not listening to you the first time, right? How do you also want to show up when your child, something wonderful happened and they're so excited to share it with you? How do you want to show up when I don't know, you're maybe laying in bed and putting your child to bed at night and having that quality time with them? How do you want to show up in those moments too? So really tune in, keeping in mind that you've already gone through the rule book you have for yourself in step one, and you've eliminated the things that you know are not realistic for yourself. They don't make sense, and it's not something you want to hold on to. Make sure you're not dragging those into your vision of how you want to be, your realistic vision of how you want to be as a mom. One of the things that really helped me was that I kept reminding myself that I cannot control my kids, right? The only person I can control is myself. So when my kids are not listening to me, instead of feeling frustration and anger, I can kind of look at it like, yes, this is the 50-50. This is them not listening because that's what they do, they're kids. I can repeat myself calmly. I can lay down a consequence if that needs to happen, right? That's how I want to show up when they're not listening. I don't want to show up with anger and frustration. So my vision for myself is that I'm going to show up knowing that I can't control them, and this is real, this happens, right? I'm not going to push back against the reality of what's really happening, because the reality is that stuff happens. But I'm going to maybe repeat myself. I'm going to lay down a consequence if I have to, and I'm going to let them behave as kids. Well, I am in control of how I'm reacting. So that is part of my vision of how I want to show up as a mom. Okay, that's part of my realistic vision that I've created for myself. So go ahead now and make sure you keep in mind that you want this to be realistic and that life is made up of messy and great times. So how do you want to show up in both of those times as a mom?